Hi, my name is Shu Wei, and this is my project. It's called the Rural Status Project, and it's for EDCI 656, a course taught by Dr. Shar Moffat. And just an outline of the project presentation. I'm going to talk about what is my project. I'm also going to talk about how I am collecting the data and also telling about what I collected. And I'm going to connect it to ideas to the ideas to resources from the course and also connect ideas to the outside resources. So what is the Rural Stair project? Um, and how it came to formation was that I read Shaft 2016, and it talked about advocating for the rethinking of rural education with rural context. And I also watched the YouTube video of Dr. Carr's discussion of rural brain drain. Um, and I also went on the Daily Yonder and found an article by Brigham that talked about learning from success stories in rural education and trying to and advocating um, the for working towards battling the deficit stereotype of ruralness. And so just those three in combination with each other help to inspire the project. So the project wants to know what rural context can be added to rural education to increase theirs. And that's for the well-being of the community. The rural context will derive from success rural education stories. Objectives of the project. I with the project, I would like to look for factors that influence rural people to stay rural after high school, and also look for factors that influence rural students to stay rural while pursuing higher education. So I collected the data in two methods. I utilize pre-collected data from research studies. So I drew from two research studies. The research studies informed the questionnaire in the survey that one of the survey participant L took. So L is a classmate in the course, and I reached out to the whole cohort, and she responded back, and so she was willing to share her rural experience, including her higher education and reasons for returning. The data collected, emerging themes from the research studies are closeness to family, appreciation of ruralness, which meaning the nature present, the environment, the surroundings, and rural community life quality. These come from Longhurst 2017 and Morrison and Mudgett 2018. So those are from those research studies. From the survey, um, Elle currently lives in Chico, but she considers herself a returner because she's still nearby Durham. So she was she's from Durham and she went to high school there and graduated from high school there. And according to Elle, 50% of the students in Durham wanted to stay, and the other half wanted to get out. So Elle's survey continues. She's not very close to her family, which is the opposite of what I found in the research studies. Because in the research studies, the participants labeled being close to family in terms of physical and also having a good relation to their family as a factor that helped them stay. But for Elle's case, she wasn't very close to her family. And I want to clarify that by close, I mean in terms of the relationship with the family. So not necessarily physically close, although she is pretty close. She did mention that she goes to visit her family every weekend. Um, and she thinks the surrounding environment is amazing, which goes hand in hand with the research studies showing that the environment is a factor that helps stayers to stay. But for Elle's case, she is a returner. And so although she doesn't necessarily say that that is the reason why she stayed, she does have a positive feeling about the environment, which relates to what the research says. Education for her was a high priority, and also for her rural community in Durham also. And the school made it clear by making every student apply to the local community college, regardless if they wanted to attend or not. And that kind of shows the cultural, socio-cultural aspect of the community values in Durham on how they view education, and also how they are trying to push the students to go to college, right? Even if it's local. And for Elle, growing up, the college equals success mentality, way of thinking was ingrained into her. And so growing up, she always was taught that she needed to go to college to succeed, to have a successful life. And she did. She went to Oregon for her for college, but then she returned for comfort because she felt more comfortable in her local rural community. And here are some factors that made Elle attend college. So Elle went to college because she knew people that went, and her parents pushed her to go. However, a factor that drew Elle away from deciding to go to college was that she wanted to travel before going to college. However, she went to college because of influences coming from her parents. And like I mentioned earlier, initially went out to college but returned because she felt more comfortable at home. For the second one, she actually went back out after she returned, and then came back to her rural community because of her relationship. Yeah. So I just wanted to connect the idea to resources from class. From class in Schaff 2016 and Asano et al. I will talk a little bit more about each resource. So a central factor in the Schaff 2016 article is the argument that rural education policies are based on an urban context, which shouldn't be the case because ruralness because rural education should require policies that have rural context. Like an urban context shouldn't be put into a rural education setting because it doesn't work for the rural education. Schaff also discusses how rural schools are pumping students to get out of rural and into urban settings, so into higher education, which are pumping out talents to go away for college and be encouraged to stay there because that is what is perceived as being successful. And so the rural communities are slowly losing talented people that could be contributing to the community. Therefore, Schaff argues for changing rural education policies to include rural context. And here are some factors that can elucidate on what kind of rural context can be added into rural education from the research studies and also L, and connecting that to this the Schaff article. So one of the emerging theme was appreciation for the surrounding, so like the nature, the environment, the wilderness around it. The research participants in the research studies stated that they had an appreciation for their surroundings, which led them to want to stay. And it's also relatable to Elle because she showed an appreciation for the surrounding. Although, like I mentioned before, she did not necessarily say that that was a reason to return. One more factor is rural family and people relations, which is also relatable to Elle because she has her family in Durham and she's in Chico, which is right next to Durham. And the research participants in the research studies, in the two research studies, indicated that they stayed because they wanted to be close to their family. And then the third factor is quality of life in a rural community. The research studies, the research study participants indicated that they liked the quality of life in a rural community. So for example, it was quiet. They could take the time for themselves. There's privacy, stuff like that. And so these contexts can be added into rural education. So for example, in rural education, teachers or the curriculum could include units that talk about the surrounding nature, the value of it, stuff like that. And the curriculum could also include rural and local history. So talk about local people, talk about what happened in the area locally, as a part of history to get the students to appreciate and relate to the history as well. And also talk about what's available in the community and not shun that away from them, not telling the students that if they stay, they are a deficit. I think teaching the students about the possible opportunities in the rural community in rural education would really help the students decide being more informed if they want to stay or go away. And for Azzano et al., it argues for economic, cultural, and political social justice for rural communities. So economic justice is like preparing students for rural life and present rural opportunities, which is like quality of life. The rural education has to teach the students that there are rural opportunities available for them, and that staying doesn't make them a deficit, doesn't make them lesser of a person in the world than someone who's in urban setting, for example. So also for cultural justice, aligning with the article from the Daily Yonder, is to suppress the stereotype of rural as deficit, saying that the quality of life in a rural setting isn't a deficit. It's an opportunity for the rural students to take the chance on. So in accordance with SHAP 2016 and the data collected, and also Asano et al., everything points towards a change in school purpose. So instead of pumping students to go to college, out to get out of the rural area, the schools should be serving for the well-being of the community, of the local community. And that could include everything that I have talked about, teaching students about the opportunities available in the local communities, and talking about possibilities of returning, so that the talent doesn't get lost and the talent comes back to increase and improve the well-being of the local rural community. So it would look something like that. And I also wanted to connect the data to outside resources as well. So for Elle's main reason to return is her relationship. She does like the surrounding environment, like I said, but that's not really a factor that she listed as for to make her want to return. And although I took data from the Longhurst and Morse and Mudgett research studies, they also provide a rationale of place attachment for stayers. And so if you look, if we take a look on the data collected and also the sources that I used, everything kind of places the conclusion on place attachment. So what is it about the place that makes the students have an attachment for it? So for example, Elle, her attachment is her relationship. For some of the research participants, for the two research studies, it's being close to their families. Their family is their attachment. Maybe the environment is their attachment. Maybe they like the environment, or maybe they like the ruralness of their local community. And so both are their attachments to want to stay rural. And that's the conclusion that I draw from the project. And I hope that future research will look into will look into how rural education can help increase stayers, because stayers are the ones that will keep the rural community healthy, that will contribute resources, their time, to improve the communities and make sure that it stays alive, and make sure that the community is healthy. Yeah, and so thank you for watching my presentation. I hope that you have been able to learn something. And I do apologize if I pronounced the research author's name incorrectly. Yeah, and yeah, I hope you take something from here on. And yeah, thank you.